Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. It's already the 6th of April, no, the 5th of April, and I'm horribly late with my tops and flops of March, I know, but reasons. It is what it is. But I didn't want to break the routine or the structure, so I thought I'd upload this film and upload this video anyway. And for those of you who might not be familiar with this video series, Tops and Flops, at the end of each month, normally, I look back at my reading of that month and then I pick a couple of books that are in the top for various reasons and a couple that are in the flop category. And we will do that this time. We start with the tops, and in the tops, we start with the book that I thought about the most. And for the month of March, that was a translated work, Agustina Basterica, Tender is the Flesh, translated from the Spanish by Sarah Moses, published in the English translation in February 2020 and in the original Spanish in 2017. Agustina Basterica is an Argentinian author, and I, of course, Googled her and saw that she is quite well known and well respected in Argentina. I shamefully have to admit I've never heard of her, and this was my first book by her. I talked about it, I think, in various videos when I hauled it, and also I think in one other video, but just very briefly, the premise and the story. The book is set in Argentina in a not specified future, in a dystopian world. You had a virus, but this time the virus didn't affect humans, but it did affect other mammals and other animals, birds, pigs. They all got poisoned by this virus, and that also meant that their flesh was poisoned. They had to be killed. Because if you are bitten by one of these animals, you get seriously sick and die. So there are no animals around anymore, and in other words, there's no meat to eat. And the government decided that we will have sort of a transition period, as they call it, in which, quote unquote, special meat is produced and farmed for eating. And that special meat are humans. So you have your main character, Marcos, who works in one of those farming facilities, and one day he is gifted a special female specimen, as it's called, so a young woman who has been farmed for eating. And then the story takes off from there, and I'm not going to tell you how the story develops because spoilers. But the premise of the book, it describes the way these human meat products, these specimens, are farmed, how they are, for instance, the vocal cords are cut because you don't want to have them screaming when they are slaughtered, stuff like that. The book is, for me at least, it succeeded in making me switch in my head from those human meat farmed animals, and I saw, pigs and cows and chickens, things like that. And I think that is the main success of the book, that it, at least for me, it worked, that I looked at the meat factory in a different, or the meat producing in a different way. I don't eat meat, I have to say, but still it really triggered something. And the other thing why it made me think is because of the moral dilemmas. Marcos, the main character, is not a bad man. He has to has this job, this factory that switched from producing other stuff to producing human meat. He has to earn money. His father has dementia. The father is in a care facility that's expensive. So you have also this question, what would you do? Or in other words, what would I do if I be in the same position? And that these two things really made me think long after I finished the book. It's not for the faint-hearted, I have to say, or the faint of stomach. It's not gross in a real, in a certain sense, it's not gross, but in another sense, it's extremely gross and difficult to read. But I thought it was an excellent premise, very well executed, this idea how we look at animals, humans and other animals, and why do we treat some animals different than others. So for those of you interested and not afraid of, you know, reading about how these humans are cut up and how the meat is processed, I can certainly recommend this book. Next up in the tops category is the book that surprised me the most, and that book is Lila by Marilynne Robinson, the third book in the Gilead series. I read the first two books already, and the third book as well as a buddy read with Doris from All the Books. And I did enjoy Gilead because of the beautiful writing. The Gilead series centers around this Reverend John Ames in a small parish in the mid-1950s in Iowa. Gilead, the first book, is from the perspective of John Ames writing. He's in his mid-70s and he's writing a letter to his young son. His son is 7 at the time. His wife, second wife, Lila, is much, much younger than the Reverend. So there is a lot of thinking and ruminating and pondering in the first book, also about religious issues. And even though I appreciated the language and the beauty of it, it didn't really grab me that much emotionally. And Home, the second one, told from the perspective of the daughter of the Reverend John Ames's best friend, set in the same time frame as Gilead, it bored me a little, I have to admit, because it didn't add for me anything. So I went into Lila with rather low expectations, and the book in that sense surprised me a lot because I really, really loved it. I thought, again, the language, of course, was beautiful, but we get the perspective of Lila, Reverend Ames's much younger wife, her backstory as an abandoned child, how she was rescued by this woman named Doll, how they together, roamed the countryside, doing odd jobs. Lila is almost illiterate. She learns to read and write, but she's not what you would call an educated woman. And then, more or less by chance, she meets Reverend John Ames, and they fall in love and they marry. The Lila, the book stops at that point when Lila is pregnant. So it's set way before the first book, Gilead. I really appreciated the way Lila as a character was fleshed out. Even though she's not a well-educated woman, she is a strong character. She is not, quote-unquote, stupid. And she questions John Ames's beliefs in a really fresh way. I mean, John Ames is more or less, living in his head, being this very intellectual character, reading a lot, having a lot of knowledge. Whereas Lila has more life experience for sure than her to-be husband. She experiences the world not through books, but through living it. And how these two characters come together, start to appreciate each other, start to love each other, start to trust each other slowly, what the difficulties are between, wobbling the camera, sorry about that. I really love that. And the emotional pull of Lila was certainly much stronger for me personally than the emotional pull in the other two books. So from all the three, um, surprising to me, I really loved Lila the most. And the last book in the tops category is the best nonfiction read, because if you're following my channel, you know that I want to promote more nonfiction also in this tops and flops series. And the best nonfiction read of March was a book that I read at the beginning of the month, Pale Rider by Laura Spinney, first published in 2017. Now, you might know, again, if you're following my channel, that I read a lot of book about the influenza epidemic last year, November, December, also in January. And one of the last books on my list was this one, Pale Rider, the most recent one that I've read. And it is again about the influenza epidemic in 1918 to 1920. And it gives, it draws on almost 100 years after the epidemic. It draws on the latest research, virology, epidemic research, but also history. So it's quite a recent view on this epidemic 100 years ago. And it also takes a global approach. It tells us how the virus spread, how it affected communities from all over the world, South America, Alaska, of course, the US and Europe, Africa. So I really appreciated, after having read quite some books about the influenza epidemic, this global approach, and the fact that it could draw on recent research results. But I read quite a good chunk of excellent nonfiction in March, but this book I wanted it affected me because I read it just before or at the time that the corona epidemic began to hit Europe. So it gave a special impact, I would say, to my reading. But apart from that, it's just an excellent book. It's well written, well explained. It tells engagingly about this story. It tells the story about this influenza epidemic engagingly, giving enough facts without being dry. So it might not be the book that you want to read in the current situation. I can understand that, but still, if you're interested in this topic, I think Pale Rider is really an excellent choice. So these were my three tops. On to the flops. And the first one, I have two in the flops category. The first one was not a bad book, but it was a disappointment. Yeah, for me, it was a disappointment. And that was a nonfiction work, a memoir, Adrian Miller in the Land of Men, published in February of this year. Adrian Miller is an American journalist. She was born in 1972. And this memoir is about her time working after college, first for GQ, and then becoming the first female literary fiction editor of Esquire. So it covers the period 1997 until 2005, when Adrian Miller was, in her mid-20s until her mid-30s. I expected something different than the book delivered, and that's why it was a disappointment. The book tells us about her work during that time for GQ and Esquire, but Adrian Miller also had, during this period, a friendship and a love affair with David Foster Wallace. Now, I'm not interested in David Foster Wallace. I'm not interested in his work. I'm not interested in his life. And I'm also not interested in his love affair with Adrian Miller. And a big portion of the book is about her relationship with David Foster Wallace, and that just bored me. And the other aspect, her work as a female in a very male-dominated work environment, was underdeveloped, I would say. I mean, she didn't really tackle or tell me about the major issues. They were just, very briefly sort of brushed but not in any sense really reflected upon or developed deeply. And that's why the book disappointed me, because a book, with the title In the Land of Men, the first female editor of the Esquire in the late 1990s, beginning of the 21st century, I expected something different. Hence, it was a disappointment. And the last book for this video, and the second book in the flops, was a book that really irked me in a way. And that is a German book, Esther Kinski Am Fluss, first published in 2014, translated and published in 2018 in the English language, the translation by Ian Galbraith. And I picked this book as our first group read for the Read German Books 2020 group that Mel started, and she asked me to join her. I'll leave a link to the Goodreads group down below. And once a quarter, we have a group read. And this one, Esther Kinski River, is the English translation, was our first one, and I picked it. So I take all the blame for that. The book is set in East London, where Esther Kinski lived for a while, and it is about her walks along the River Lee, in East London. And she also talks about memories of other rivers in Germany and the importance of rivers, and she describes her walks. There are little drawings also in the book about her walks. If you read Teju Cole's book, The City, I think it's called, I sort of was thinking of that, a writer walking and telling, thinking about during the walks and telling me, memoirish, but it is a novel. It's supposed to be a novel. And I just didn't like it. I didn't like the language. It was it's a type of German book that really irks me. This very high intellectual kind of writing. The imagery is just slapping you left and right, that you can't even recover from one image to the next. And it's so highbrow. No, it's not for me. I don't like this style of writing, and I don't like this style of novel. And I was not the only one, obviously. That's why I feel really sorry for picking this book, because most of the people who read it in the group, they didn't enjoy it, and I can totally understand it. So again, I'm sorry for it. Anyway, these were my tops and flops, slightly belated for the month of March. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. As always, stay safe and healthy. Talk to me in the comment section if you want to, and by the way, I know I'm behind with answering my comments, reasons, but I will get to that eventually. Anyway, I see you all in the next one.